The Atomic Real Estate Show, bringing you the real state of real estate. Brought to you by Danny Bennett Productions in partnership with Direct Subs.
This episode is brought to you by Downtown Mechanical. Downtown Mechanical is your one-stop shop for all of your HVAC needs, residential and light commercial. Downtown Mechanical specializes in installation of full units, swap outs, repair, service, rooftop units, mini split systems, heat pumps, whatever you need HVAC-wise. I personally use them on all of my properties. Matt Rispo is the owner. Great guy. I love working with them. They accept credit cards, free estimates, and they offer financing. You can get a hold of them at downtownmechanicalllc.com or by phone 215-617-3768.
Hey guys, we're here with Chris Karakoff from Studio C Architecture and our colleague Nick Cessna, Ryan Dolan, for another episode of the Atomic Real Estate Show. So today we brought in Chris to discuss the wonderful world of building in the architectural space. He does residential, mixed use, commercial. He is all over the city of Philadelphia, based out of Narberth, I believe, your company. But in our area, Roxborough, Manayunkee Falls, he's doing a ton of projects. And Nick and Chris work together. So, Chris, thank you for stopping by. We
Thanks
really
for having me,
appreciate
guys.
you having us. I'm super excited to hear a lot about your projects. You got major things going on, even one as of yesterday that we'll get to later in the show that is great news for the community. But yeah, welcome. So tell us a little bit about your business, what it is you do, and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
Again, Chris Karakoff, Studio C Architecture. We're a boutique architecture firm. We do all kinds of different projects. We take on everything you guys can throw at us. So, residential, we do a lot of multifamily. We do restaurants, commercial, a lot of new construction, single family, everything.
That's excellent.
Anything
So, Nick, how did you guys get linked up together? I know because you do a lot of work for partners of ours, Baker Street and Roxborough, Manayunkee section. So how did you guys get linked up?
So
the same channel?
I met Chris through Steve and Andy at Baker Street Partners, and I'm not just saying this because they're my friends, but they are known for the creative exteriors and the designs where they fit buildings into the neighborhood. And that's a long conversation we get into about how people in our neighborhood, and this was actually some feedback that we had through the show and put some questionnaires out, that people wanted to know like what we felt about the building in our neighborhood. And a lot of these, for lack of a better term, like shit boxes.
Yeah. And
BSP is really known now, and I've been to a lot of the meetings where they're presenting projects, and you're at these meetings, and they are known for, and it comes up all the time, the great architecture and how they fit these buildings in of various sizes that look like they belong in our neighborhood. And when you look into that, that's Chris. And that's Chris and his team. And I'm not going to say it has nothing to do with BSP. Like you take their ideas, but that is a lot of input from Steve and Andy. Like Steve's really good with that stuff.
It's a collaboration. They're great with it. But yeah, a lot of their projects are, we get variances to try to kind of fit things in. So we're dealing with the neighborhoods a lot. That requires us to go through the community groups and get them on board. So as a result, we kind of design higher end, nicer looking stuff so that people want it in their community, that we kind of have to sell them on it essentially.
Sure.
And we're always doing stuff to kind of make the scale feel smaller so it doesn't it doesn't feel like too much in their overwhelming.
And these meetings that I've been at, for a long time they're on Zoom. Sometimes they are still on Zoom.
Yeah,
recently it is more popular.
Still,
that was a great thing that came out of COVID. Great thing that came out of COVID.
I hated driving those meetings.
So I've seen it numerous times now where people, they now know you, they know BSP, they know your guys' designs, and these are neighbors where we watch them because a lot of times you have to sit there during the other meetings. The stuff that you're presenting might not be first, it might be second or third or fourth project, and you watch these community members just cook people. Yeah, I mean they are blasting these guys, right? And there's been a few where they were a little hostile, like where stuff was, but the one thing that's always constant that I see is they always have great things to say about the designs that you guys put up. And that goes, that I've never seen that before. I've been to a ton of of these community meetings, I've never seen praise like that for work, and that's your work.
They're usually there with their pitchforks ready to
Yes.
kind of pounce. But they've been very well received, and I think that has to do with BSP's reputation in the neighborhood. I mean,
Absolutely.
they build what is on the paper. A lot of times we put out great designs, and a lot of times, if we're not hired for construction administration during the process of construction, a lot of things kind of get lost in the sauce. But BSP doesn't do that. They follow the plans. We kind of, Andy's great at, he has a lot of construction knowledge, so he knows pricing. He knows, we kind of flush all that out before we put anything on paper and put it in front of the community. So
They're really great in general at those meetings, how they interact with people, where I might tell people to go fuck themselves. They're very polite. They're very good. But the other thing that I find interesting is not always do builders bring on the design professionals onto these meetings. You're there at every single one that I've ever seen, and you're answering a lot of questions. They go right to you, and you handle yourself really well with these people. You're on camera, and you're at these Zooms, and you're talking to these people, and that's what made me think, like, all right, we want to get architecture on here for the podcast. And I immediately thought of you because I've seen you on these meetings, and I called you and I asked you. I said, Chris, you're very articulate. You are fucking extremely knowledgeable in your field. Can you come on? You were like, sure. But you kind of like, when I said it to you, were kind of like, really? But you are. And you might not realize that, because I watch these meetings happen and these other people are stumbling and they don't know what to say and they're shuffling stuff. And you're like, hey guys, can I have control of the screen? Give me control of the screen. And he takes control of the screen on these Zoom meetings, and as people are talking about stuff, he's putting pictures up. So even when people are commenting, Chris takes control of the screen. Like, people are asking, and Chris rolls stuff on there. He's like, wait a minute, are you talking about this part? And then he sometimes it makes it way better. So now everyone is on the same fucking page on these meetings, which is really cool to see.
Which, leading these groups, so our listeners, obviously want to know where you get your start, right? Like, how do you get in your line of work? How long you been in it? And then how do you get fast forward all the way to these community meetings where, I mean, you're proposing plans to take hundreds-year-old buildings and renovate them. So tell us kind of how you get started for our young listeners that want to get into the game and your experience that way. And then we can get to the meeting part on how you kind of do your presentation.
Yeah, okay. So I got my start. I went to University of Pittsburgh for undergrad. And had I known I wanted to become an architect, I probably wouldn't have gone there, because they don't have an actual accredited degree, or they didn't at the time. I think they do now. They had an architectural studies program. Yeah, they had an architectural studies program, which is big in history and theory, but is more like, I'm not in the studio, drafting and practicing, design, that kind of thing. So I finished my schooling there around 2002, something like that, 4 years later, and had to go to grad school. And so,
what made you interested in architecture before you decided to go to college for that?
That's a good question. I guess growing up, I was always interested in how things work, taking things apart and not necessarily putting them back together. So I guess now I'm putting things back together.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. Being an undergrad, trying to think about what I wanted to do, I was taking, a bunch of different classes, and I think
so your parents,
architecture really struck me.
Your parents weren't architects, or anything?
No, not at all. Oh, no. My dad was an accountant, so kind of, different side of the brain, I think.
So you have to get you went and got your graduate degree, you said?
Yeah, so I went to grad school, San Diego, New School of Architecture in San Diego. That was a three-year program, great program, small class. I think we had about, maybe 50 people in my class, and you're doing all studio design stuff.
How'd you get linked up to go all the way out there? Just through the grapevine and kind of as you're...
I chose it by location. I
was
like, all right, if
man.
I'm going to grad school, I looked at, a place in Oregon, Hawaii.
Say it's like the best weather in the world.
San Diego is phenomenal, right? Yeah. You don't even talk about the weather when you're there. It's literally
just
beautiful
nice
weather all the time, so it's not even worth mentioning.
Yeah. You have a lot of military there and all.
Yeah. And fortunately,
a lot of beautiful people there.
Yes,
a lot of very attractive people.
Dude,
there.
It's a good place to live.
Yeah, that's cool.
But fortunately, one of my professors there hired me. He was he took on a lot of like interns. His office, he's kind of small office, and he brought people in from like co-op programs. And
It's a great way to get employees.
I know, right? Yeah, cheap labor is good.
Yeah.
But he was a good dude. I mean, he was like an encyclopedia of knowledge. He was
Well, and
amazing.
he could pick the best of the class.
Exactly, which he didn't hire out of our school. He was a teacher there, but he didn't hire. But we were doing, we had this one project where we had to design, this detail for an infinity drain, which back then they didn't have like prefab stuff. Like, we had to kind of figure out how to do it. And my detail was exactly the same as the one he was doing. Everybody else was not even close. But so he saw that, and he's like, hey, you want to come work at the office here? So I worked there the whole time I was going to school, and that was kind of like a night school program, so you could work during the day.
So you probably learn more there than
Oh my
you did at
God.
school.
Yeah. And the fact, and I would absolutely recommend this if you can. If you're working in the field while you're going to school, it was amazing because all the knowledge of like construction classes I was taking, like that would have gone right over my head. But I'm meanwhile in the office, like, oh, this applies to what
Little trial by fire.
literally this
right
project
there,
I'm
yeah.
working on right now. I can use this information.
Wow.
So it was really good experience. So
That's cool, man.
yeah. So yeah, worked the whole time I was there. Stayed a couple years after grad school, and then made the move back here for some reason.
This is where you're from originally, and then you
I
went
am,
to,
yeah. My family's out here, so I grew up, in like the Villanova area.
Nice.
And,
And then you're doing a lot of work in and outside of the city. Is there kind of like a preference? Is the city kind of more your strong suit just because there's older buildings to kind of play with, or?
Yeah, good question. I most of my work is in Philadelphia, but I do work in Jersey. I'm licensed in Jersey, and the surrounding areas of Philadelphia too. Preference wise, I just like the next new project. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I like the variety of projects, and So.
Now, this region of the country, in Philadelphia specifically, I would imagine this is like a kind of a wet dream for architects.
It is.
Because a lot of these places in the Midwest and even out in California, it's a lot of cookie cutter type, boring shit, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of like really cool old architecture in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of history here, a lot of historic architecture. There's, it's good being. I always wanted to make sure that I was near a big city because you get a lot of opportunity there. But working in San Diego, it's kind of a completely different vernacular. It's newer. It's a newer place. Yeah, there's big, Orange County type developments, but at the same time in the city, there's awesome modern. It's different. It's modern. You can have more indoor outdoor design where you're not even putting air conditioning and heating necessarily in buildings. Radiant floor mat heating might be enough. So,
different. It's different.
So you could kind of there's not bugs. You could it's just a different. But you do have earthquakes. So
Sure.
there's different things to consider. You got to work on your shear.
more
You can't have these
engineering.
big openings without having like strong walls and stuff like that.
A lot more engineering and goes into that
Absolutely.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I notice on a lot of your projects, like you do, you're big on like outside cornices and crown molding and different roofing
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Like it's a kind of, you're paying homage to the Philadelphia stuff with a modern twist, but not too modern. Like it
Yeah.
fits in. It's like today's Philadelphia. Like the stuff that you do, I love the shit that you do. It's cool.
That's well put because and a lot of times it's because we're infilling something or we're trying to kind of fit into the neighborhood. So we're not gonna build with materials that we did or the way we did way back when. So that's where that more kind of modern look to it comes from. But yet we are paying homage to it. We have a cornice, but maybe it's a more flat stock cornice that it fits in more with the way we build now. Like
Sure.
you're getting this decorative, there's just not those artisans that are making that, or it's, plastic or whatever.
Yeah,
So I'd rather
junk.
not use it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
garbage
we're
stuff.
trying to kind of be true to the materials we have now and the way we build now.
Sure.
You know?
So now, I like your point to where you've learned how to kind of do your work on the West Coast, where it's completely different on the East Coast. So when you came back here, did you start your own firm right away? Did you jump under someone's mentorship? Like how does that work? Just again for our guys that are listening that want to get into the game.
Yeah, I came back. I moved back here right around 2008, which was the recession. So it was actually really difficult to find work. Architecture was they're the last ones to kind of pick back up again. But fortunately, I found a firm now in Manayunk that I worked at for a good 10 years. it was a small firm, and there's a lot of opportunity for, they were still figuring out. They kind of had just started 2 years prior to me getting there, and a lot of the stuff I learned with my professor out in San Diego, where he was very like OCD about file structure and having CAD blocks and having in the library like almost to a fault. It was like, I don't know how he made any money, but
Sure.
he was so focused on that stuff. And so I was able to take a lot of that knowledge. He gives us the opposite at this firm that I worked at when I moved back here. We were in Flowertown when I first started, and so I was I basically like cleaned up, created a CAD library, and so worked my way up in that office and became a partner there. And like I said, worked there for 10 years, and then it just got to the point I always wanted to work on my own.
Spread your wings, go on your own.
Yeah,
start your own
basically. I was
job.
putting a lot of hours in there, and just kind of felt like I could be doing more with my time. So I left there around 2017 and started my own firm, and thinking I was going to kind of take a cut in pay, and it was a scary jump to make. I had to get my wife on board, and I had kids at the time too. So
that sales pitch is
it was
amazing.
scary. It was scary, but I mean, immediately it saw paid dividends. I mean,
Sure.
I thought I was going to take a cut, and I like tripled what I was making. So
It's great.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
So
it was-
you were bracing yourself for a couple down years,
Absolutely.
as any new business owner would.
Yeah.
How does that look? Like when you are 10 years at your old firm, how do you even get started, kind of with the new firm?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I was kind of taking some work on the side, completely separate from my office and those clients. I was, through meeting some people, just took on some worked nights and weekends, and so I was working all the time. I'd work my day job, which went from like 9 to like at least 6, and then come home and eat dinner with the family, and then get back to work with my extracurricular stuff, which I was really excited about, because I was like, I saw
It's
it kind of,
yours.
it's mine,
Yeah.
exactly, and I'm making my logo and figuring out what I'm going to do, and it's an exciting process to go through, and then it got to the point where I had so much work, and I'm like, how am I going to get this done? And I was seeing the money come in, and I'm like, well, I think I can make this work, so.
And you need to hire other people,
Yeah, exactly. Well,
which that's not easy.
fortunately, I had a couple great colleagues that were also not too happy where they were,
Okay.
and they kind of jumped ship around the same time as me. So we kind of just kept the dream team alive.
Any of those people still with you?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
they all are. Yeah.
Really? They're all with you
Yeah,
still?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a huge. I have Joanne who works with me, and she's great. We work, on interior heavy projects. We'll sit down and kind of like put our heads together and like get restaurant design, that kind of thing, and get the full interior package with her. She's really fun to work with. And then, but on the day to day, usually I'll kind of get through design phase with my clients, and then pass it off to her to kind of get it through construction drawings, that kind of thing.
So you got in, you said in 2008, but you started, I'd imagine in 2017, the times were probably pretty good at that point.
Yeah.
When you started rocking and rolling. Now, the restaurant you keep hitting on, I worked in the hospitality space for years. It's where I first started, and where most Manayunk guys and Roxborough guys do start. They have to be awesome to put together these restaurants. I mean,
They're fun. Yeah, they're fun. They have their challenges, but they're also, it's really fun. I mean, from a design standpoint, I mean, a lot of architects don't want to do any kind of interior design. The firm I worked with previously, we did both. We had both in-house, because they really should kind of
married
work
together,
work in
they?
unison.
That's something that and recently I've gotten into projects where I'm kind of learning this stuff. But most normal people, or most people just sitting on the sidelines looking in, would think, hey, if an architectural firm's going to pick this up, they're probably going to do both in and out. So some will just focus on the exterior,
A lot
the
of people-
blueprints, and then
Exactly.
you'll
A
have
lot-
your interior design.
There's a lot that goes into interior design, and it's a tough business. A lot of people don't want to pay for it. You got HGTV telling everybody they can kind of do it themselves, and there's a lot to it, and it takes a lot of time, and as a result can be expensive for people to pay for. So a lot of architecture firms just wipe their hands clean of it. We'll design the shell. You got wood flooring. All right, you guys kind of figure out the rest. Here's where your kitchen goes. So, and I have projects that's all I'm asked to do. A lot of developer. A lot of my developer clients, that's kind of what they need. I'll give them the kitchen, make sure it's working. I usually kind of lay it out for them to get them, kind
Do you do full on kitchen designs and stuff as
yeah,
well?
Yeah, as like a separate service. It depends on the project. Like I say, if I have a
fire suppression, all that kind of stuff, and
if I have like a high-end residential client or something like that, I'll usually include, like I'm doing one right now.
I'm talking about like commercial, like say a restaurant. You get involved in all those
everything. Yeah,
fire
suppression,
I
was doing the full commercial kitchen design. A lot of people.
There's a lot of limitations and rules with the commercial kitchens.
Yeah, so. yeah. There is. There's a lot to know. Yeah, and and a lot of people will, sub that out basically. There's kitchen equipment people who are specifically there to design kitchens with clients.
So you can be a one-stop shop for people.
I am a one-stop shop for that. If I'll sit down with the chefs, and I kind of understand. I'm a chef at home, so I kind of understand how things work. So we'll go through and make sure the kitchen kind of works for them.
Flows
lay
together.
It out,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So we had a guy on here on the show before, Jason from LK Commercial, and he was talking about having architects and engineers and all that stuff, and so that's good. So now people got the end of that where he takes it from the commercials, the drawings that you guys like you make, and then now here you are, you're the one that does all the stuff, and guys like me or him build them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The interior stuff is kind of, do you like doing that more than the exterior? Is there any preference? Or I would imagine the in and out would be a longer job and probably yield more money for the company. But the kind of churn and burn exterior moves quicker. You get more jobs that way?
So restaurant clients, they are looking to us for expertise and everything, but they don't always have a huge budget. Mm-hmm. Yet, the design is a very important part of it. So, it's not always the most profitable part of my business. I do enjoy it, and that's why I do it. It does take a lot of time and dedication, and it can be frustrating because sometimes things are swapped out that you didn't want to be, that were important or whatever. But really, it's I love doing it. It's fun.
So they're more like passion projects.
Kind of. They can be.
And then they can be a great place. They can be a great place for you and your wife to go for a free date night.
Exactly.
Probably,
You
right?
get a lot of free dinners out of it.
But I mean, ultimately, you add it to the portfolio, and then it's like, hey, we did this, and then it's your referral base as well. So obviously, if you do right by one restaurant owner, their goal is usually to open more. So I'm sure they have a lot of friends, but I can understand that because, as we mentioned on the show, and I do quite a bit, we have a boutique hotel in Old City. And we were kind of like, hey, this is our budget. We need to kind of stick with it. And we did a lot of change orders, a lot of swap outs. And I could tell from that standpoint, well, one, we would always just get a freaking bill. But two, other than that, I mean, I could see those moving pieces as budget comes into play with newer or inexperienced investors. That would be kind of a headache. But you got to kind of keep your cool, as you said, make it work, because if not,
business. It's got to work
business,
for everybody.
Right?
I get it. I always got the next project on the horizon, so you can't fall in love too much with. I'm when I'm working on a project, my head's in it. It's all I'm thinking about.
Sure.
But as soon as I kind of hand that off, it's no longer in my hands. I'm always there. If they say, listen, this material is coming in too expensive, or what this. Hey, I know the design concept, so I can give you alternates. They don't always come to me, but meaning they don't always come back to me to ask that question. But I'm always there to.
How does it work from the the vendor? Are they shopping around? Are they calling different people? Or are you more or less like you said, you're a one-stop shop?
I put all the vendor names, all the materials that we've selected in there. So they as a contractor, you get that set of plans. You could price it out down to the to the penny, and
nice.
Then that's the point at which if you have something's too expensive. I mean, I don't have time when I'm with the deadlines we usually have to shop everything, so I'm making selections, not necessarily knowing exactly what the price is.
Yeah, if you want to go with a Viking refrigerator,
some
or
things
a GD,
I know, but I select this wall covering and this tile. I didn't realize that tile was $50 a square foot. I thought that was going to be more of a $7 square foot. So, and we could certainly find something that's that's that price, and still fits the concept and gets the colors right and everything like that.
Yeah. How long does like a restaurant concept inside? So it obviously depends on the square footage where you're doing it, but just say like a typical one yesterday there was great word that one of the historic buildings on Main Street, Manayunk, you got the bid for it. You won the contract for it, and it's a beautiful space. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I know you have tons of projects going on, but that was one that I heard.
No, that's a big project for us. We've been working on it for a while now. Dan Nedison and Nedison Properties came to us. You know, we've got a great relationship with him, doing a lot of his projects. And he came to us. He's always wanted this building to be. Previously, it was like a furniture shop, something like that. It's this beautiful historic building, and he came to us. He always wanted a restaurant or some kind of concept like that in there. And he came to us early on before he had any client in there and asked us to do a concept without a client or anything like
an
that.
Exterior concept.
No, full interior, at the whole thing. So we went in, measured everything, got it all the as-builds drawn up, and we when going through there, we saw on the top floor there's these big steel trusses that support the roof. It's imagine like a bridge with the kind of steel zigzag trusses. And so they're spaced every 5 feet up there, and it's this awesome space that was used as storage. And we saw the potential, and hey, we could make something out of this. And so we basically put together a design booklet that showed how a restaurant could work in there and what it could look like. And he used that booklet. So we had 3D renderings of from the basement floor where we were proposing a kitchen, private dining, that kind of thing. The main level where we had, bar and seating, the mezzanine level, additional seating, that kind of thing. And then using that top floor as there's views to the canal, kind of like a beer garden type of a scenario. So we kind of just put that concept together with 3D renderings, and he used that to shop potential tenants. And he found a great tenant. I'm not sure that I can say who. It's good.
But so say what separates yourself.
That's smart.
Yeah, it was great.
That's
So he separates himself by what? You're identifying space that's not being used right now that could be a major feature.
That's kind of where we brought value into the building. He didn't even know that.
He didn't even know it existed.
Yeah,
most people would just have that building, buy that building, and then just look for a commercial tenant, and then have them do a triple net lease and have them do all the renovations, all that stuff. He hired you, spent a couple of dollars, and then had you come up with a concept and then put it out there to certain people, and they were like, yup, that's the space. And
he told me, he's like, that's the best money I ever spent, because he was able to find a really
That's
great...
genius. Now, I don't know this guy. Obviously, I've heard of him, Nedison, just from being a neighbor and being an investor. I don't know if this story's true, but from the point I heard this story, I was like, this dude's awesome. This dude's got massive balls, and he is cool.
He is very cool.
I heard that obviously you're not allowed to use demolition. You're not allowed to use explosives, demo charges to do stuff in the city of Philadelphia. And there was some land that he had. I don't even know if it was in Philadelphia, but there was some land that he had, and it was all rock face, and it would have been way too much money and all this stuff to try to chip it away. So he waited for a weekend, used explosives, blew it up, got it, and then just was like, fuck you, find me. and I was like, that's my type of dude. Okay? I don't know if that's true, but
I haven't heard that story, but that sounds about
people.
right. I mean, he's got his guys that work for him. This guy, Tony, he's a gruff dude, but, gets shit done. You know what I mean? They do stuff. They have their ways of working around. I mean, Manayunk loves him. He's
been there since the inception of Main Street before, when it
transitioned
over in the
Street
90s. I worked with him. I worked for him for years and all the restaurants and companies that they all owned and or had partnership interests in. Yeah. So, we lived there and saw the kind of new transformation from the old, mills and biker bars and all that stuff to all the restaurants and shops and boutiques, little places.
We weren't even allowed down Main Street when we were kids. It was like, don't go down
there. That's right. You're the
it
was a shithole.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a total tumbleweed kind of dump until at least the first one that I can remember is the River Deck, which is now.
And then the Bayou. And then the Bayou, too.
The River Deck where, I think at the Lincoln Mill haunt.
That's where Brian
Corcadellis is. Yeah. That was one of the first catalysts of Main Street kind of getting started. But then Dan and his partnership group, opened up KC Prime, Sonoma, Arroyo, all these places down there. And they had, this is 25, 30 years ago at this point, and they had great designs back then. So it's really neat to see how you come fast forward 20 years later. And now you're heading all these designs. Yeah. And now I feel like we're in another transition in Main Street where it's definitely getting out of the college bar scene, like kind of shitty shops. We're starting to see more brew pubs, high-end restaurants. I mean, real unique boutique shops.
I hope this building sparks more.
That building, I must say, that building it was a furniture store.
You can walk past that.
So,
you can walk right past it,
and
but
never
drive
know
past
it.
not notice it.
There's probably plenty of people that do it all the time.
But when you stand there and look at it,
gorgeous.
it's a really cool building.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So we're talking about your newest project on Main Street, which again, as selfishly, it's one of my favorite buildings down there. So I can't wait to hear about it. But for our listeners, what are some of the projects in or throughout the city that you've done that you're super proud of? Because I know of your work, but our viewers don't, and they'd be pleasantly surprised to see a lot of the projects that you guys have done.
And you can get us some content to give to Danny here, and Danny can put it on screen. Here's another weird fact. We just found out today. Danny lives in a building that Chris designed.
Yeah, I was just going to
mention Which is pretty
that.
Cool.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that people were living there yet.
What's the honest truth there, Dan?
So yeah, that was the biggest project I've ever worked on. Actually, that 5001 Umbria Street. We call it Industry Lofts. I'm not sure if they kept the name or not. But
yes, it says it on the front.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Score one for
What's
me.
it next to?
It's where Mel's Kitchen used to be, across from
Across
Le
from the
Bob.
bar.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's you. Okay, man.
And then it's going. So the phase one was the one on Umbria, and then phase two they're building now, and I think they're sealing it in. I think they're siding windows and all.
Yeah, I saw the facades up now.
That's a big building. How many units is that whole project?
153 units spread over those two buildings. So the lower building, the design concept there was that it was kind of, we used a more rustic looking, like kind of rough brick to make it almost look like it was a, like an old mill building warehouse to kind of fit in with the streetscape that's on Umbria.
As you come up the hill, like as you come from Manayunk, and as you get over the crest at that building where they have like the wood crafts and all that stuff across from train station, and then you start to come down, and then as you go back up, like across Parker, you see it, and it fits in perfectly. Like it kind of like just looks like it's been there for 100 years.
And you guys almost had to build that one into the hill, the rocks. Correct?
Yes, that is a huge retaining wall behind. There's a lot of engineering that went into that because it was not exactly a stable hill there. There was nothing stabilizing, and it was just brush that was kind of holding it up there. So a lot of thought went into how we were going to engineer that. We have great on-grade parking off of Umbria there, and that solid wall is part of the retaining wall system, and it kind of tiers its way up. He would know because he has a backyard there.
So that's a true like building into the hills of Manayunk.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, built into the hills. Yeah.
I remember the meeting for that one.
Yeah, that was
because that's a BSP. That was a BSP project that proposed that building, and I remember they were asking like the neighborhood association, and it's people that like. Some of these people in these neighborhood associations, like they don't even drive. They don't even drive on that street ever, right? And a lot of them are just like old cackling hens that just want to complain about shit. And I remember that one specifically where they were like, "Well, are you going to put a street light there?" And Chris was like, "I could see it in your face. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about?" But then you answered it like real professionally, and the lady was just like, "Oh, okay." And I was just like, I was thinking like, this bitch has never driven a car past this street. What is she talking about?
Yeah. I mean, it was tough because we're, the community, they're always focused on parking. Are you going to take up my parking spots? Yet this was a transit-oriented development overlay. So the city, on the other hand, didn't want us to provide parking. They said the train's right there.
So they would allow you to build 150 plus units and zero parking.
Yeah, but the problem is we needed a variance, so we needed the community on board. So it's like this kind of pushing and pulling.
Yeah.
So
but then also BSP wants. Yeah. They always want like one for
because
one,
the reality is it's not there yet. I mean, it's kind of like if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was kind of a first step of actually making this transit-oriented development, area work as actually transit-oriented. Because right now there's not that many bus stops that are getting. I mean, how are you going to get to the grocery store? That's what the community people were saying.
There's one where the
still
city
need a car.
The city was saying you don't need to provide parking, and the developers could have been greedy and said, "Okay, I get more units. I get more units out of it." And they were like, "Nope."
No.
They like one for one parking at least, and a lot of parking available, and that just that speaks volumes about their character.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at some of these other buildings that people are building, and they're taking advantage of that no parking thing, and that's where the neighbors really have a leg to stand on and be like, "What the fuck are you talking?" Like, wait a minute. There's a big disconnect here between what the city wants and what we want, and BSP is there, and I'm not just saying this to blow them because they're some of my best friends, but they do this and they delete the money. They can make a lot more money. They delete that, and they're like, we want parking, and we want the people to live in these buildings to be here for a long time.
Yeah, and they live in the neighborhood too. They don't want to piss everybody off, and they want to keep that reputation that they have.
Do it the right way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what do you think the city's motive for no parking spaces is? Get them jump on the train, get into town, have your office down there, spend your money down there. Which again, you know,
that's big politics though. It's big like there's this one good idea, and they're just so one dimensional.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying the city is right here. I'm saying I think it would be an absolute travesty if you built that building and had no parking.
It would be a
spaces.
disaster.
I mean, one, it's not walkable to really anything. It's just not. I mean, to Main Street probably, but again, it's a mile plus walk.
And think about it, to get it to actually happen, to actually be a working transit oriented development, you need a huge input of money to upgrade the public transit system, and you don't have the people right there right now to do it.
Yeah.
So then you got to get the people there, and yet that's what we were dealing with. Now we just created a little mini city there.
Yeah.
Danny
wouldn't have lived there because he was when he was looking for stuff. He told me he specifically wanted a place where his fancy vehicle could be safe.
There you go.
You know,
see
these young guys, they love their fancy vehicles.
You have a covered parking spot there. Yeah, see that.
I mean,
so
they all
safe.
have to have a parking spot at this point. I can't imagine somebody buying or renting a place like that not having a car. I mean, you have to.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly,
it's not definitely
1-to-1.
Yeah, it's just not.
It's not Fishtown where you can walk.
Not like on a
You
grid.
can walk. You can get down to the main street easily.
Sure, you could.
You could hop on the R7,
R6.
R6.
But to your point, there's that mini city infrastructure is not there. There's no grocery store. There's no doctor.
But you can get your groceries delivered.
Nowadays.
I guess so.
Yeah, nowadays.
There's ways to it is. And now because there's so many people living there, now the city's going to start sending more buses there and improve the bus routes and.
I live 2 or 3 blocks away, and people in the community groups were complaining this and that, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I literally drive down that street every fucking day. Like you're not going to argue with me. Like I'm the one that's affected by it, and I think this is great because the property where it was blighted for so many years, and it was a shit bomb.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's get some good residential.
It's a junkyard up top on that hill.
You're gonna get some more higher end people in there, younger business professionals.
It's feeding all the businesses on Main Street, all those restaurants, everything's
they'll fall in
thriving
love with the neighborhood, and then they're going to want to stay there and have kids, and then they're going to buy single family homes off of me or be my neighbor.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's great. That's what I want.
So this is so much more than just putting together architectural drawings, getting blueprints. I mean, these community meetings, it's fascinating because I'd imagine a good portion of these people are just against progress in any form or fashion.
You
right?
get a lot of that, and most you do see that plenty of that.
I could see that, like, hey, that little, they would prefer to have a one little shack and a dump there just because their mind can't wrap around, like, hey, this is progress, change.
I grew up here. It's always been this way.
Yeah, like, we don't need this guy coming in and doing this.
It's the same thing in every meeting. How are we going to get the traffic across the Green Lane Bridge and get on 76? Every fucking meeting, dude. It's the exact same bitch.
Well, if they build enough, maybe they'll build a new bridge. I mean,
people bitch about the exact same thing, dude. It's like the same bitching on every project. Well, we can't handle the traffic that's going across Green. It's like, that's a problem that's been going on.
Yeah, you've had that all this time.
That's never.
I-76 was outdated when it was finished.
Yeah.
It was outdated.
Yeah.
So, like, that's not, like, our neighborhood's problem. We have to advance our neighborhood.
Yeah. So then you have, people like that you're fighting against. And then, these like your street light question, like, no shit, you're going to have 150 units. There's going to be street lights everywhere. Yeah. But, so what are the challenges there with those neighborhood communities? Like what's kind of a hard stop? Parking, obviously, as we touched on.
Parking, trash, storage, and how you're getting your trash in and out. That's always a hot button. What else the design of it, how it fits in, is it too big? But yeah.
The good thing is if somebody hires you now, you've been to so many of these meetings, and you've been to meetings in a pretty hostile fucking neighborhood where people are like, there's people cursing you out at these fucking meetings and being really nasty. And so the advantage of you, if someone hiring you, is if you have to go to a meeting, you have so much experience in these things. So in your designs already what they're going to bitch about.
Yeah.
And you can have all that, and you have all the questions.
Yeah, we're building that argument. I'm advising my client if this is never going to fly. You're never going to get this approved. We gotta think about these things now before we even present it to anybody.
and think about how you're going to change this financially now, because you have the experience of like, hey, I was on one of these projects before, similar to yours, and this was denied, and these were the things that they wanted us to change. Like, let's go with a loaded gun here, and let's be ahead of the curve here.
Yeah.
And that's the advantage that you bring to people wanting
Is
to
that
develop.
because like a lot of these community and civic groups have been scorned by built fly-by-night developers that just want to kind of get in there, do a shitty project, make their coin and get out? Because I know the BSP group and now your company, you're taking and restoring these buildings to the incredible, like, the structures are insane. Like your one on Leverington, the Trent, the new building that's coming up is like, most guys would come in and probably knock that down, I would assume, right? And then just build townhomes everywhere. But this project is going to be a massive one, correct?
Yeah,
Like how many
nice
units
project.
are there?
Yeah, so we're restoring the mill building there. And that's another project with BSP, and we all love that building. We're kind of bringing it back to its former glory.
Such a cool building.
Which
it's a
neighbors
great
would
building.
all have to unanimously love that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's
right?
zoned industrial right now,
Okay.
so that's why we had to. So just to clarify, the reason we're meeting with these neighborhood groups, you don't have to do it on every project. If you're doing projects by right, meaning you're following the rules, the zoning says you're allowed 4 units here, and you're putting 4 units, then you just follow that, and you don't have to go to zoning meetings and get the ZBA, the zoning.
But now sometimes they do. They still go and they do like just to tell the community, hey, this is what we're doing here. So they're not pulling wool over people's eyes. So
If
they don't even have to do that. Like
they don't have to do it.
They don't have to,
always,
but they do it, and they're like, hey, do you guys? Here's some options that we were thinking about. What's your input? So like that goes a long way. That meeting for the Leverington one, there was the Trent building. There was an overwhelming amount of support for that one.
Yeah,
I was at
they
that
liked it.
meeting.
I mean, we were proposing something, so we restoring the building, because who knows what was going to happen. It was going to sit vacant, or the previous tenant, which was
There was some kind of manufacturer.
yeah, I can't remember. I think off the top of my head.
Was it like some kind of industrial equipment?
Yeah, they're making parts, and
Yeah.
it was still running, but they were going.
I had
out of
no
business.
idea that building. I thought that building was shut down for 20 years.
Yeah,
There was
no,
only a
it's
couple
been-
cars in there.
I mean, really,
they had the
I
same
did.
employees
It dialed
forever.
back. It's
Yeah.
it hadn't been doing
No,
ton.
like I don't think the younger people in the family wanted to take the business over and stuff like that. They were just like, we want to sell.
Yeah. So
And Steve O can see that building from his backyard.
It's incredible.
So it's like,
Yeah, you're right.
you know what I mean? It's like, how you going to argue with that dude? Development, he can see it from his backyard.
This
He's
is
never
my
moving.
new backyard. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, my new view. Yeah, so we're putting on the upper parking lot, higher up on the hill. There's a parking lot there. We're gonna subdivide that, and we got approval for a new building there, and that's gonna have, I think, like 27 units in it. Nice lobby, gym area.
Parking underneath.
Parking underneath. Yeah, we got parking. We got a lot of parking on that. We're close to 1-to-1 on that one as well. So.
Nice.
Yeah, we got parking. You enter off of the lower street there and go into the mill building, and it will actually connect subgrade to the new building as well. So there's parking all in the lower level of the mill building, a driveway that goes to the basement of our new construction as well. So you got.
And
tons
while
of
you're
parking.
talking about this, Danny actually flew the drone over that building already for BSP, so he can put some footage
Yeah,
on here
sweet.
of
All right, cool,
that
and-
Leverington.
Everybody from the neighborhood probably doesn't, unless we see this, isn't going to know the building. But the second you throw that graphic up, they're going to say, "Oh my God."
Oh, that's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Trent
every
building,
single
yes.
person's
Yeah.
going to understand that. Now, so what happens when these guys grab it? They come to you and say, "Hey, this is kind of what we're thinking," and you guys collaborate on. All right, this is what we're going to do with the outdoor space, parking, restaurant space, commercial. You guys just kind of hammer that all out.
Yeah. It's great working with those guys. They're very knowledgeable. So we'll meet on site and they'll already kind of have some idea of what needs to happen for their pro forma to work. So need to hit a certain number of units. All right. Well, we've got, a natural corridor down the middle here. We could do units on either side to kind of max out what we can do. We've got windows, every bedroom needs to have an egress window. So that's always a constraint we're looking at. And then, amenity space we have like a dog walk area in the back rear portion. There's, we were working with the planning commission. That's a big building, so we were required to kind of work with the streets. We had a big meeting early on with all those guys, the planning, and they all kind of had their requirements that they needed. We needed buffer along, landscape buffer we have some surface parking at the lower part of the building. So we needed 5 foot, certain number of trees, shade trees, and this and that. So we're working with all that. So
How long does that approval process take on a project like that? Say you're dealing with the city of Philadelphia, you have to kind of present it to them for approval. So how long does something like that take until you can get kind of shovels in the ground after you guys conceptualize what you're thinking about doing?
So that one, we had to get neighborhood approval. So it really depends on how quickly you can get. We're usually kind of as fast as possible get our zoning plan in so that we can get a refusal, so that we can kind of get on the ZBA calendar. And then once we have that, boom, let's get back to really designing this out, meet with those people while we're waiting for that calendar. So that, and I think the ZBA calendar is like 6 months out. So, we used that time to work with the departments and kind of fine tune what we got, what we had initially submitted. So it actually changed a little bit from what our initial submission. So we have like an amended plan basically that we present to ZBA that the community, that's the one that we've presented to the community, gotten everybody on board for, and that all happens kind of in that time frame.
In that like 6 month grace period to kind of give you guys time.
And you can save clients a lot of time because these processes like the back of your hand. You say, hey, you're even thinking about doing this, you're hiring me, let's put in for this immediately.
Exactly.
Put in for it immediately, and then we'll get the shit together.
Someone who didn't know might spend all this time initially planning and then realize, I didn't even realize we needed a variance, and now we spent all this time, I got to change it all, or I got to, so.
And then these renderings too, like he talked about the dog walk, like on that one, I remember that meeting, and he's saying the dog walk, and then he has these renderings up that look realistic, and it's a dude walking a dog, like they're right there, like it's like pretty cool, man. It looks realistic.
Yeah.
So now what's kind of, we went through the Main Street project, the Trent building. What's kind of like your pride and joy of your company? Because I just checked out the website a little earlier. Obviously, the website's great. So definitely check in, take a look at all these amazing projects. I didn't know you guys did half of these projects that we drive by every single day. So what's kind of like one of your favorite passion projects that you did around here?
Good question. So,
because you guys have a lot of them. I mean, there's
I know.
a lot of good ones.
I go through my
I put you
Instagram
on the
and
spot
remember.
there.
Yeah. I mean, well, like we were talking about earlier, I mean, I think a big project for me right now is the brewery that we're doing. I don't think we finished that conversation, but Dan Nettison shopped with that booklet and found a perfect fit tenant who's an established brewery. I'm not going to mention their name right now, but they loved that concept. And it's funny, in those early design meetings, they're like, so we just want to see if we could add a table here. I'm like, whoa, like this was just a conceptual, we had a lot of detail in there. We're showing how many tables and everything you'd have. And they were like, let's do it. So, but we obviously changed the design aesthetic to kind of meet what they wanted and have completely fresh renderings, which we hopefully can pop up for the viewers here while we're talking. But we're going to have commercial kitchens going on the lowest level with a private dining room down there. There's an elevator that's going into the building to serve all the floors. The ground level, we're fixing the facade, kind of bringing it up, but paying homage to the history there and just making it keeping it the beautiful building it is.
You're doing like 3 doors away too. That was a really cool building.
Yeah, nice.
That really fit in.
That fit that Main
looks
Street
like it's
profile.
Been there forever.
Yeah, further down the block where the sweat gym was, we're doing some. That gym unfortunately closed. The business wasn't working anymore. So we did residential units in there.
Oh,
that's
really?
Yeah.
Was like a bike store underneath?
Yeah,
right?
that's still there. That's
so what's
staying.
that? The Cadence under? Well, it was Cadence at one point.
Yes, it's Trek now.
Okay.
Yeah,
so now with
close.
a building like that, all right, I guess so you can probably take that, and you're not probably adding on too much to that. So
we are actually there's opportunity to add up above. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So it made sense. There was like some serious that was built like a brick shit house for some reason.
Yeah,
there was like
it really
a lot
was.
of structure
That's what
in
I was
there.
thinking.
I mean,
like you wouldn't
steel
have to do
trusses
anything to
and
that.
everything. We're like, shit, we could just plunk a whole nother level on top of this.
So that job will be actually easy for you because it was built like a tank. And
yeah,
it's like
it was. It took very little to kind of add another story. We got I think 4 units up above there. It's set back from the street. You'll never see it. But
and that's an adaptive reuse type building. That's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, working with what was there. There's the stair towers in there. So yeah.
What
Yeah,
about your
definitely.
older building? Like, so to the hotel downtown, where it's right in Old City, so it's like right across from Second Street. And obviously, we bought it. We're super green at doing it. Do older historic buildings pose much more of an issue just because of the layout of what you can and can't get through the historic process?
Yeah. So the historic process, fortunately, I've kind of gained a good relationship with a couple of the members there. Is that usually I'll kind of throw stuff to them early on in the process, just giving them a heads up if I know we're going to be running through their.
Have them involved.
Absolutely, let's get them on board early. And one project we did, it's on Spruce Street, beautiful area. And there was zoning that was approved by a prior, firm. So I was kind of working with. We're adding a single-family kind of structure on the rear that faces Delancey. There's an existing one-story garage there that we're demoing, but kind of keeping the garage for that thing. It's gonna be really nice, and we wanted it to really have a historic look to it because it's in a very historic-looking neighborhood. So that was one I sent early on to Allison Maley at the historic department, and they just to get some initial feedback. They were generally early on like very on board with it. So we took it through the process. So that's a process where you submit for your building permit. It goes through the HARB process because it's a historic district. So similar to a community meeting, but you're working with the elected officials. So it's a two-part process. So first you meet with the Architectural Review Board, and they're kind of these, well-educated historian / architect type people that will really kind of pick apart what you're putting in front of them. They generally really liked what we did. They wanted a little more detail in certain areas, but generally, kind of loved it.
So it's almost a two-pronged approach where obviously your company, your reputation, stands alone, but the Architectural Review Board also sees it, and if they probably sign off and give it you, then it probably moves a little quicker. I would think.
Yeah. So you'll get feedback from them. It's a mapped out process. You're on this date for the Architectural Review Board, and you already have your date for the commission. So you get your presentation done with the review board. They give you feedback. You can choose to take it or not. We usually kind of pick and choose what we're gonna. I agree with that. Usually they're fairly reasonable, at least on the projects. Some people they tear apart. If you're putting something in front of them, I kind of know what they want to do. I have a good history background.
Well, you're working with them up front instead of just waiting for the meeting and waiting for your board meetings and all that stuff and zoning stuff. You're working with these even the community groups, not even historical stuff. I know that you've worked with the community groups up front and say, you give it to them first, say, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And then they give you some feedback. They're involved. They know about the project before it even goes to the meeting with the neighbors. And then you have their input. And I've actually seen them on your side.
Yeah.
And I've seen the community group people keep the members in check because they're like, hey, wait a minute. Chris and this developer brought this to us early on, and we presented our thoughts on this, and we gave them pushback on a few things, and they've changed it for us. So if they go to bat for you, and you're approaching it in a way that most people aren't, you're approaching these people beforehand as opposed to coming to the meeting.
And it's really the way that's a good way to design. I mean,
sure.
you want to work with the communities. That's really why these community boards are in place because it's their neighborhood. It should be a collaborative thing. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's not. The people spring a design on people, and people are there with their pitchforks, pissed, and this is the first time seeing this. Like and it's not the right way to go about it. I mean, as long as the feedback is reasonable, and it gives us an opportunity to explain our side of things, and people are generally reasonable as long as you kind of educate them on what you're trying to do.
It's why a lot of your stuff gets built.
Yeah,
it's why a lot of your stuff gets approved. And gets built.
Well, we're looking forward to, I know I am, to having a beer at the new place down on Main Street. That's one we'll do a follow-up little episode down there and check out this beautiful design because really I think it's going to be more or less the cornerstone of that Main Street, really. It's
will.
Dead smack in the middle. So what's next? Are you guys staying the course? Do you got bigger projects planned? Like what's next for Studio C?
Yeah, we've got... let's see, what do we have coming up? I have some nice, a pretty awesome, very high-end single-family that we're doing in like Fishtown area. It's
Nice.
It was a pretty unique lot. It was a existing one-story garage someone was just using for storage and that kind of thing, but it's got front-loaded parking on it, which is not permitted normally, but it's grandfathered in, and it's full coverage, so the building is the entire footprint. So we're building a new
It's gonna be a big money
structure above it that is set back on the front, set back on the rear, so you got these cool built-in roof decks on that existing structure. We're going up 3 stories above that, and it's going to be.
So that's just
it's
a
a very modern.
That's
design.
a private owner grabbing that property, and then so tell our viewers
Yeah.
how they can kind of get a hold of you and what's the steps there, because I've invested and done some projects in Fishtown myself, and kind of don't know that first step, like who am I calling?
Yeah, so that's a speculative house. So a developer client of mine bought that property, and I worked with him. Here's what I think we could do on this. That's what we could do by right. I look at the zoning. I'll always people throw me properties. I'll give them, the zoning breakdown. I don't charge for that. It just kind of
you do like a pro bono look at it.
Yeah,
almost
just like here's what you could build there, like almost to try to avoid having to get a variance.
Yeah, I mean, you did East Street for us. Danny did a video there. We've shown that on the show before. You did Leverington Ave for us. That was Andy's uncle's house that we bought.
Oh, yeah.
We actually kept like the stone facade
Yeah,
and built a whole new construction house in and behind it on a double lot where we could have knocked it down, but it was this cool building and we kept it, and we just built one big residential building. The other thing that I like about Chris is we talked about it before, where architects and engineers put stuff through, and then kind of to get through the planning commission downtown, and there's no connection between the planning commission and like the field inspectors and the people building stuff. East Street, we did that. I remember being up on the roof. I called Chris. He answers the phone. Chris, can I FaceTime you real quick? Sure. I switched the phone around, FaceTime him. I'm like, listen, we knocked off this. We knocked off the roof. We're doing this. And he's like, okay, you need and it was a question about fire. I just had a question about fire rating, and you're like, "Yep, you need this sheathing here, and like the gypsum-based sheathing here, and do this, do that." So like he's available. So I call him while I'm framing it up and building it. I'm like, "Yo, what do you think about this?" And you're like, "Perfect. That looks good. I want you to do." Well, you don't actually like. You approach it in a different way. You don't say like you have to do this or like some other people do. You're like, "Hey, I recommend it." You do it in a very like nice way.
way.
Yeah. And you're like, "Hey, I recommend you do this." And I'm like, all right, cool, perfect. Because he knows the aspects of the stuff that I know how to build it.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff where it's like to code and this and that, like some of it's on the fringe because there was an alleyway there. I'm like, do I really need this? And you're like, yeah, you need this here and do this. And you're like, let me see how you tied this together. And I showed you, and you're like, perfect, cool, works.
You're clearing up a lot of kind of common concerns that just regular run-of-the-mill people would have, right? Like picking up the phone and calling an architect. One, you think they're not available. Two, you think if they pick up, it's going to get real expensive real fast. And 3, when you hear the word architecture, a lot of resi guys think like, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I can cut that corner, which I know I run into a lot. I'm like, hey, get on the phone, call, and either your engineer, your structural engineer, your architect. This is probably something you're going to want to figure out before you start knocking down load-bearing walls and things like that.
It's worth the money. I mean, we're not that expensive, I don't think, and especially in the grand scheme of any construction project, we're going to be very
And
small
if
line
somebody
item.
just wants to call and give you just have a consultation call.
Oh,
I mean,
I don't like to nickel and dime anybody. So
Like you went through East before I even owned it. I'm getting it under. Chris, I got this house under contract. I want to add a 3rd floor. Can you come look at it? Yeah, sure, man. Next Tuesday work for you? Yup, cool. It's on lockbox. We can go whenever we want. We meet there. He looked at things. Was like, "What are you thinking?" I tell him, and he's like, "Okay, I'm thinking this." And I'm like, and we go back and forth, and it ended up being a really cool fucking project.
Yeah.
Well, I got to be honest, because the East, we done some shows there, and I grew up right around the corner from there. I used to hang on Terrace in the East Corner. I thought the number that you got the product was amazing, right? But again, it was hard for me to wrap my brain around. Like, man, they popped up the 3rd floor. How the hell are you going to get the dollar?
And we sold it for like over $550.
And he sold it for over. And I got to be honest, that house was freaking awesome. But it's a testament to how great and quick that came together fast. Like not many people will pop that 3rd floor. They would just kind of put lipstick on. And
Chris knew he knows the importance of time.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, he knew when I called and said, I have this under contract, I want to do this. He came right out, looked at it, was like, yeah, no problem, Nick. We'll have all the stuff in. Boom. Now I have a good relationship with the L&I inspector. I was able to just pull a regular interior demo permit, get started. The L&I guys knew, like, hey, you have permits in for this other stuff. go ahead and start framing up the existing. And then, you know, by that time, when I was ready to do the third floor, Chris calls back, hey, you're approved. Boom. Let's rip it off and do it.
So like a real success story right here.
Yeah.
And that's why we brought you on, man. Tell our viewers your Instagram, your website, because we're going to wrap up. And I definitely I have a lot of clients that would love to get a hold of you. So please tell us.
Yeah, so a great place to check us out is on Instagram. We'll put the handle up. I think it's studio_C_architecture. And then our website also has, it's www.studiocarchitecturellc.com. Has a lot of our projects and, you know, more description about what we can do for you. And we'll provide email and phone number.
What's your email?
It's my name, Chris, CHRIS, .Karakhoff, CARICKHOFF @gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, look, Chris, we really appreciate you coming on the Atomic Real Estate Show. As for Nick Cessna, Ryan Dolan, we're out.
If you enjoyed our episode, please consider supporting the show by rating and reviewing the podcast. Also, check us out on Instagram at Atomic Real Estate Show to find out when new shows drop and to participate in our community Q&As. The Atomic Real Estate Show was brought to you by Direct Subs. Direct Subs is the #1 place for real estate investors to connect with local contractors for their flips, rentals, renovations, and new construction projects.